Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today. My name is Kevin Weiner and I will be the moderator on this webinar. I'm excited to be joined today by Dr. Gertrude Riegler, DEM Product Manager with Airbus Defense and Space, as well as Patrick Collins, a Senior Solutions Engineer at Harris Corporation. During the discussion today, Gertrude and Pat will cover how Airbus Defense and Space, WorldDEM data, and Harris Advanced ENVI image analytics can be combined to improve the accuracy of your geospatial products and solve elevation-related problems. If you have any questions at any point during the webinar, feel free to use the question area of your GoToWebinar dashboard. Gertrude and Pat will try to address as many questions as they can at the end of the webinar, and if they don't get to your question, they will try to follow up with you. And now I'm going to turn things over to our first speaker, Patrick Collins.
Hey, thanks a lot, Kevin, and thanks, Gertrude, for being here today, and thanks for all the attendees on the phone. So I'm just going to give you a quick overview of what we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to begin by giving a quick sort of overview of ENVI image analysis software and sort of the different types of data that we work with, the different types of analysis we can do with it. And then I'm going to pass it over to Gertrude. She's going to discuss Airbus sort of data products and the WorldDEM product and sort of some of the advantages there. And then she's going to talk a little more about some of the use cases for elevation information and how sort of it can be used to solve some real-world problems, using this specific data set. Next, it'll come back to me, so I'll be giving you guys a scenario-based demonstration based on a landslide that happened in Malin, India last year in 2014, showing some different Airbus data types and how you can use it to solve some real-world scenarios. And then finally, we'll have plenty of time for questions at the end. So as Kevin mentioned, if you have questions during the webinar, excuse me, please feel free to use the question portion of your GoToWebinar console, and you can type in questions there, and we'll address those questions at the end of the webinar. So without further ado, so here's sort of a quick depiction of the ENVI stack. It consists of ENVI, which is an image analysis software that is designed to extract information from geospatial data. We use all different kinds of data. We can do a lot of different types of analysis, and I can show you a couple of those here in a second. ENVI is built on the Interactive Data Language, or IDL, which is basically a scripting language that allows for the analysis of complex numerical information of all types, including geospatial data. So it doesn't necessarily have to be referenced on the Earth for IDL to work with it, but it's definitely the underlying language that does all the geospatial processing within ENVI. And what's nice is you can use it to script your own custom analyses if you want, to run specific analytic steps in a programmatic sense, if that makes sense. And then finally, we have a consulting group. So there's a lot of tough geospatial problems out there. We have a good group of folks here in Boulder and also out in Suffolk, Virginia, that can help you or your business if you have tough geospatial problems that you would like some help with solving. So what kinds of industries do we work in? Now, we work across a multitude of different industries, including forest or natural resource management. We have a long history of working in defense and intelligence. We do a lot with disaster response. You can see an image here of this flood that happened locally here in Boulder, Colorado a couple years ago. We also do asset management, so things like roadways, bridges, sort of city infrastructure. We have tools and analyses that can help you sort of manage your city infrastructure. We use a ton of different data types. IDL kind of enables that in the background. So we can analyze multispectral imagery. We have a long history of hyperspectral analysis. We can use synthetic aperture radar or SAR data, elevation data, as you'll see during this webinar. And we also have some pretty robust Lidar tools, which you'll also see in this webinar, which is pretty cool. You'll see how we pull a point cloud out of some imagery and then do some Lidar analysis on it. And so analysis types, right? So we do a lot of different analysis, different types of analysis, things like image classification, both supervised or unsupervised. We can do feature extraction of information from the images, including both object-based or spectrally based feature extraction. Excuse me. We also do, we can do target detection or material identification depending on the number of image bands that you have in your data, where you can tell the differences between, different mineral types or, different types of paint. And we also do change detection. So looking at an area over time and seeing what changes have occurred. And you'll see some more of that here during the webinar. We also have a pretty robust Lidar analysis capabilities. Like I mentioned before, we can automatically extract from the point cloud trees, buildings, power lines, all with attribution behind them, as well as different terrain information, such as digital surface models, digital elevation models, ground contours, and things like that. So that's a quick overview of the ENVI stack. I'm going to pass it to Gertrude now to give you an overview of Airbus and the Airbus WorldDEM product. Gertrude, let me know if you don't get the...
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Pat. And thanks for joining to the audience also from my side. To introduce Airbus briefly, Geointelligence at Airbus Defence and Space today is one of the leading providers of geospatial information. We're offering commercial access to the most advanced optical and radar satellite constellations. So there are the optical satellites of the Spot family and the Pleiad satellites, as well as the Formosat and Deimos satellites. And additionally, we also have two radar satellites, Terasa X and Tandem X. Our core competencies include satellite imagery, tasking and archive data, advanced image processing of orthomosaics and digital elevation models, as well as management of big geospatial data, providing data management services and image processing capabilities, supporting monitoring and surveillance services, and operating 40 direct receiving stations around the world. But today, we are talking about the unique data set of WorldDEM. Why is WorldDEM an unique elevation model product? So it's the first homogeneous, consistent, and seamless elevation model product covering the entire landmass of the Earth. So it's a pole-to-pole data set with an unprecedented accuracy and quality. The data collection was done during the so-called Tandem X mission. The two satellites, Terasa X and Tandem X, were flying in a close formation, acquiring interferometric data pairs. That means that one satellite was sending the radar pulse, and both sensors were acquiring the backscattered signal, as shown in this little picture on the side. Each point on Earth was covered at least 2 times. Challenging areas like Himalaya or the Andes were covered even 4 or more times to ensure the quality. The main goal of the mission was to generate a global elevation model, and that's why it was possible to do all the data acquisition within 3.5 years only. The mission was realized within a public-private partnership between the German Aerospace Center called DLR and Airbus. So on DLR side was to launch the satellite, to operate the mission, doing the mission control, and also includes the data processing. On Airbus side, the value editing of the process data, and also the responsibility for the commercial exploitation of the WorldDEM. If you have a look to the picture here in the corner, you see the areas in green which are already processed by the DLR and can be ordered. At the moment, we have more than 113 million square kilometers ready for ordering. And this database is available on our website, so you can always go there and see when areas come next. What WorldDEM products can be ordered and are offered by us? So we have a DSM and a DTM product. So DSM stands for surface model, includes the height of the vegetation and buildings, and a DTM representing the bare earth. That means that the height of buildings and vegetation is removed. In our post-processing procedure for the surface model, the terrain is edited in case of radar artifacts or there are voids or missing pixels. And additionally, the water bodies are edited. That means that the lakes are flattened to the height of the shoreline. The rivers are flattened monotonically in 50 centimeter steps to ensure that the river flows downhill, and the ocean is flattened. One more comment to the rivers. The bridges are also removed to ensure hydrological consistency. And just a side note, we are also offering a so-called unedited DSM for customers who want to do the editing by themselves or have complete different specification. But for that, the knowledge how to do that and also the software is needed, of course. Some words on the specification. First, the accuracy numbers. The absolute vertical accuracy for the DSM is better than 4 meter, LE90, and a relative accuracy in areas less than 20% slope is better than 2 meter even. For the DTM, we have absolutely 10 meter and relatively 5 meter. Horizontal accuracy for all the products is 6 meters. The file format is GeoTIFF, delivered as 32 floating point data and geographic coordinates. And important to mention that the grid spacing is about 12 meters, so we are in geographic coordinates, that means 0.4 arcseconds. I want to give you an impression about the quality of WorldDEM. So in this sample, for example, we are looking at a very flat area in Minnesota. You can identify many features. For example, here, very prominent, you see this winding river going here, but not just the winding river, you also see this very shallow drainages and small creeks going into the river. We are just looking at a colorized elevation model. There is no image overlaid, just to mention that. In the middle, we see clearly the embankment of a highway with the junctions and exits here very clearly. We even can see here this rectangular shaped piece here, which is a farmer's place. So you can see here the fences around this place. Here we can see, for example, single trees. And if possible, I hope you can see this dotted line here going in parallel to this road. These are the poles of a power line. So we have a lot of small features, and I'm sure when you think about a 12-meter posting elevation model, you never expect such a richness of detail. That's why I would like to compare WorldDEM with Lidar. We know that Lidar is more or less the best what we can get. And of course, you see that the buildings in this open urban area is much cleaner, clearer, and sharp compared to the WorldDEM. But depending on the application, WorldDEM could be sufficient. For example, for mapping the city structure or buildings, you also could do it here. You can see, for example, when you compare these buildings here, the orientation and the position of the buildings. Of course, here it's clearer, but you can definitely see and map this also in WorldDEM. And WorldDEM, as said at the beginning, it's available worldwide, and also the cost factor for the customer, of course, is much less. So it's about, in some cases, about 10. And when we do an absolute comparison, for example, 2 points here, we see that the absolute difference is about 1 meter. So sometimes it would make sense, even you are doing city mapping or so, to think WorldDEM could be an option and to double check. And also another comparison I would like to do is compare WorldDEM compared to SRTM. SRTM is a very well-known data set and everybody likes to use it and works with it. And it's also the second reason why I like to compare it is because it's based on the same technology. It's also interferometry, just shuttle-based and not satellite-based. So when we compare SRTM90 with SRTM30, we don't see a big step or improvement in the quality because it's based on the same data set, as you know. But when we go and compare to WorldDEM, suddenly you really can see the structure of the area, and it's clear that we are looking at an agricultural area. So dominating are the field structures, of course. We can identify the single fields. Again, we have here single trees, what we can see. For example, when we have a look to this field here, we see that the harvested part here compared to the corner where still the crop is, the difference is just about 60 centimeters. And I also want to point you to the river going through that. Here again, you can see something here. This is all visible and to identify in the elevation model. Again, there is no image on top of the elevation model. We're just looking at height information here. Now I want to go and talking about all this quality and level of detail, I like to show use cases where accuracy is key. Here an example for helicopter landing sites, for example. So to identify those sites in certain areas, a land cover map is helpful to extract bare earth areas and to combine this with a very accurate elevation model information for analyzing the slope. And this result you also can compare to based on the calculation based on SRTM, and we see clear differences where DEM delivers much more differentiated and reliable information where a helicopter, for example, really can land. Another use case is based on line of sight analysis, for example, for terrestrial radio communication, when the line of sight from a certain point needs to be computed. Here we have the results of 3 different kind of elevation models. We compare SRTM 90 meter with Aster and WorldDEM. And in this example, again, we can see clearly differences depending on the accuracy of the 3 different kind of elevation models. And the results based on WorldDEM, for example, we can identify in the valley here the riverbed going through it. So again, we see clear differences depending on the quality of the input data, actually what we also expect. So as my last example, I want to show the result of a project investigating sea level rise up with respect to the geomorphological and hydrological impact in human and natural environment. In the project, sea level rise up was modeled using WorldDEM in comparison to Aster DEM in the area of Toulon in France. When we compare just the elevation models, we see clearly the differences in quality. When you just have a look to the coastline, for example, in WorldDEM, we clearly see here the docks and the basins of the harbor area. And there's also an island which is absolutely not part of the Aster DEM. So we can see that the Aster DEM is definitely quite coarse compared to WorldDEM. So now the modeling results, so we are looking at sea level rise up of 0 meter plus 3 already shows us in a detailed elevation model like WorldDEM that the entire harbor area, the port, is already affected, and even this land bridge is flooded. When we have a more coarse elevation model, as here with Aster, we more or less can't see any effect. And of course it gets worse with plus 5 meters sea level rise up and plus 10 meter sea level rise up. We also can see on land that it makes sense that the water, of course, runs along this hill here on land. On the other elevation model, for example, we have patches of water, which makes no sense. So this is a clear example demonstrating quite impressively how crucial the quality of elevation reference is for hydrological modeling. Thank you, and back to Pat.
All right, thanks, Gertrude. Let's see, get this back for you. All right, So for the next piece of the webinar, I'm going to discuss a scenario-based demonstration, as mentioned before, surrounding this landslide that occurred in Malin, India, last year in 2014. You can see on the left here, this is an Airbus image of the post-event, obviously, of the landslide. This was caused by excessive rain in the region over just a matter of a couple of days. There were over 150 victims of this particular event, and over 44 houses were destroyed during this event. And here on the right, you can see that's an actual picture of that landslide. You can really understand sort of the magnitude of it from that picture. So, some of the questions that we ask in these kinds of scenarios is, how do you find accurate elevation data in this kind of a scenario? After an event like this, it can be hard for responders to get into this area due to the rain or other landslides that might have, blocked roads. What effect does the accuracy of the elevation information you can get have on any kinds of analysis that you might run? And we'll show some examples of that and sort of different accuracy levels based on the elevation data that you're using. And thirdly, what kinds of information can you actually retrieve from the elevation data itself, looking at, change detection over time with elevation data itself. So without further ado, let's see. All right. Updates, you can see it. All right, so here we have, this is the ENVI interface. We have an image here. This is an Airbus image from Playod that is, it's been pan sharpened. This is the pre-landslide image right here. I can show you, if I can see what you're seeing, so I'll make sure I give it time to kind of update here. Okay, so here you can see, this is the post-event image, right? You can see this landslide here. It's pretty intense, pre-landslide. Wait for the update. Sorry if the updates are slow. And then post-landslide. So you can see here, if I were to display the post-landslide image here in a portal, wait for this to update. You can start punching through the imagery to look at the image underneath it. And the key here is, as you start looking at this road here to the left of the landslide, you can see these images are not very well aligned, right? You can see this curvy road right here. These images are pretty far off. So if I were to run any change detection here right now, it's not going to pick up any good information because these images are not aligned very well. So what I did then, I got some GM-TED data and basically orthorectified these two images using, basically, freely available GM-TED data. So if I were to display these two data sets in the portal, you can see that they've come a lot closer than they were before, but they're still not 100%. You can see the edge of this road here is not necessarily lining up with the road from the other image. So that's an orthorectification using a freely available GM-TED data set. When I run change detection between those two, let me shut this portal off and make sure that your screens are catching up. So this is a image change detection between these two data sets. And you can start seeing in white where this landslide has occurred. It doesn't look that bad, I can slice this imagery, or this data set, start looking at, sort of areas of major change by thresholding that result. And, you can see this landslide. You can start seeing some of the buildings that might have disappeared during this. One thing that I'm really looking at, though, is along this road, you see these red lines and blue lines right next to this road. This red line and this blue line right next to it. That's basically showing the inaccuracy within the elevation underneath, because those images aren't necessarily 100% aligned. It's showing a road as having both positive and negative change because it's moved within each of the two different images. So what I was able to do is download some a WorldDEM from Airbus. You can see it here. This is the elevation data. And with that, I was able to orthorectify those same two data sets using the WorldDEM data set behind it. So if I bring this up in a portal, you can see these images. And let me wait for the to catch up here. There you go. You can see these images are aligned perfectly. You know, within this road area here, there's no shift east-west. There's no shift north-south. They're really lined up really, really well together. So what that means is that when I run a change detection, this is the change detection image that I get here. So kind of similar looking to the other one, but if you look, like for instance, if you look in some of these fields or down in the sort of center images, these are the differences between these two images. So if you look over here on the left in the non-WorldDEM data, you can see it's kind of blurry, you know, and you see this long black line and this long white line. That's that road shift that you're going to start seeing when you start slicing that data up. So again, if I bring this back on, this area is cleared up a lot more. That road looks a lot better. You're really just focusing on areas that have actually changed instead of noticing just changes due to inaccuracy within the elevation data. So again, if I slice that up, you can see this, the landslide here. You can see these buildings, but you're not getting all of that noise that you saw in the earlier data set. And just for comparison, this is your image of your GM change detection here. And shut that off. And this is the image of the WorldDEM change detection. So it really starts clearing out a lot of that noise that is due to these shifts in the imagery due to inaccurate elevation information behind the orthorectification process. So next, I got two Airbus data sets, just like this post-landslide one, and was able to run, and I'll show you the tool here. I'll type it here in ENVI. So we have a generate point clouds by dense image matching, and what this is basically doing is taking two images of the same area from different angles, similar to stereo, but they don't have to be actual stereo pairs, and generating a point cloud out of it. So what that looks like, I'll wait for the screen to catch up. So this here is a view of this point cloud that was extracted from the Pleiad data, viewed in ENVI Lidar, which is sort of our Lidar capabilities. And if I zoom over this area, you can see this landslide here. And that's very nice for visualization purposes. You can see it here in the middle. It's sort of come down in this area. But what's nice is that with Lidar, I can process this data. I'll let this pop up. So within our processing data properties, we can choose a bunch of different things that we can produce, such as orthophotos, surface models, elevation models. We can extract buildings, trees, point clouds, DEM contours, terrain information, stuff like that. I'm going to save you the time of processing this data and just show you the end result. So when I pull these up, so what we have here is our pre and post. I'll wait for the screen to catch up. There you go. We have our pre and post images here, and we also have our digital elevation model. So that pop up. We also have a digital surface model that was pulled off of the imagery that you can see right here. It's a little bit different. This will show things that are on the surface as well, such as trees, buildings, things like that. You can start seeing this landslide here in the middle. I was also able to pull DEM contours off this, just kind of a little extra added bonus. But again, you can tell from the closeness of these lines the accuracy of the Pleiad data in the background. And you can start seeing from these contours where this landslide has occurred on this slope. So once we have that information in, we take our DEM and we take our WorldDEM, and we want to do a change detection of the surface of this area. And what we do is we basically subtract one from the other. And there's two ways to do that. The first way to do that is to match the resolution of the higher resolution data set to the lower resolution data set, which could be known as upsampling. This is the result of sort of that upsample and sort of subtracting the higher res from the lower res, but matching the lower resolution data accuracies. The other way to do it is to match the lower resolution data to the higher resolution data, which you see here. And if I were to zoom in, wait for the screen to catch up for you guys. Keep on zooming. So you'll start seeing that there are a lot of different pixels within each one of these individual pixels that are the lower res elevation information. So this looks pretty good. You know, you say we can get a pretty good depiction of what's going on there. But the key is, you zoom out again. You know, we can slice this information here, and it starts looking like this. So you start getting a rough idea of where this event might have occurred, but it's looking a little choppy, right? So what we can use in ENVI is what's called a convolution filter, and basically go through and smooth out that information. So this is a convolution filter that's been run, and when I slice it, you can see here that it starts looking a little more like an actual elevation product, right? That's showing an actual amount of change within a certain area. I actually redid the convolution again at a higher filter and was able to come up with this elevation change that you can see right here. So it basically smoothed out sort of that the discrepancy between the different data sets to be able to pull out a much more accurate representation of the change in this area. So just for comparison, that's what it looked like before. You run a couple of convolutions on it, and you actually get a good representation of you know, where this thing occurred. And just to kind of bring the imagery underneath it, let's see here. You know, this is pretty much right where the major area of this landslide occurred. So that sort of goes to show, you know, how important accurate elevation information is, you know, when you're running these kinds of analysis. You know, you can get free elevation information, you know, on a large scale. You know, it's probably not that, you know, that relevant to have, you know, super high dense elevation information. But at a scale like this, you can see how running analysis could really mislead or misguide you if your information hasn't been orthorectified with the most accurate elevation information that you can get your hands on. So that's about it for the demonstration itself. Let's see, I will bring the PowerPoint back up here. And that's about it for the webinar. We definitely wanted to leave plenty of time for questions. You can definitely use your question portion of your GoToWebinar console to ask any questions that you have, and we are here to answer your questions. So thank you for attending, and we'll stay on the phone here for a bit to see what else you guys want to know about.
Great. Thank you very much, Gertrude and Pat, for your presentations. At this point, as Pat mentioned, Gertrude and Pat are going to address some of the questions that have come in, so I'm going to ask some of them now. So as a reminder, again, feel free to enter them into the question area if you have additional information that you'd like addressed. And as a reminder, we are recording this webinar, and the recording will be available both on the Excelis Viz website, so www.excelisvis.com, as well as on the Airbus side, www.geoairbusds.com/ENVI. And if you have additional questions that you want answered, feel free to reach out to either of our speakers after the webinar, and they can either answer them or put you in touch with the people that can. So with that, I'm going to Looks like we've had a bunch of great questions come in, so I'm going to start asking a few of them. So let's see. A question looks like for Gertrude. Do you know when data will be available for all of Nepal and Bangladesh?
I should be, sorry, I have to think. Next is coming in is Indonesia, this area, so could be part of this already. That means by the end of the year we have this part.
Great. Another question, and I'm just reading what it says, so you have to tell me if it doesn't make sense. Does temporal resolution exist? If yes, what is the temporal resolution for the WorldDEM?
That's a tricky question because this definitely depends on the application, I would say. So for some applications, you absolutely need fresh data. You need probably really from a certain event or something or at a specific date. For that, WorldDEM is, let's say, archived database. So that means the timestamp on it is the data acquisition. And as I said, it took 3.5 years, and it started at the very end of 2010. So looking back, let's say the data at least are 2 years old, more or less. This is not sufficient for all applications we have, we know that. But it's a great database and a great reference for many applications, and also probably for doing monitoring, that you have a reference elevation model, and then probably you need to monitor to create, depending on the application, more elevation models over a certain period.
Great. It looks like we've had a question for Pat come in. Pat, can you tell us some of the other applications you've worked on with customers where really precise elevation information was required?
Yeah, definitely. We had done, we did some work looking at solar panel placement in sort of these suburban communities. And so what you're doing there is you're taking elevation information, calculating slope and calculating aspect, and then trying to figure out which roofs have slopes within, I think it's like 10 to 20 or 10 to 30 degrees, and then aspect of basically due south plus or minus 90 degrees as being buildings that are, good candidates for putting solar placement on there. So you could tell if those elevation data are off by very much at all, you're really not pinpointing roofs, and you're looking at, lawns and things like that. So that was one example where elevation information was really important. Another one was we did an analysis after Hurricane Sandy here in the States, where there was a large, a new channel was dug out of a barrier island along Fire Island in New York State. And so we were able to use elevation information to calculate how much debris or sand or soil was not only taken away from that area, but also redeposited on other areas of the shoreline. And that was another example of where accurate elevation information was really critical.
Great, thank you, Pat. Looks like we have a question for Gertrude. Gertrude, can you repeat what you do to prepare the DEM for rivers? You mentioned a flattening procedure.
That's right. So as you might know that the water bodies look really very rough and noisy, let's say, in elevation models. It's not real elevation information in it, and that's the reason why we have to flatten it, because also the water bodies characterize an area. So you cannot really recognize an area, even you know it very well, if the water bodies are not flattened and we see them as a lake or as a river. And for the lakes, for the rivers, that was the question, we flatten the water area of this river according to the shoreline along the river, along the elevation along the river, and we step it with in 50 centimeter steps. So somehow we have to step it, and it's by definition in our specification that we say 50 centimeter steps. So we look at the let's say, kind of beginning of the river and the end of the river, and in between we step it by 50 centimeter steps.
Great.
And does this explain the question? Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Again, if they have additional questions, I can follow up directly with you, since we can't understand if we don't know for sure if they got the answer that they were after, but I'm pretty sure that you did, so thank you. Pat, someone asks, you mentioned the ability to pull elevation information, such as from a point cloud from non-LiDAR sources. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, so there's a couple ways to extract elevation information from imagery, basically. And so one is using stereo pairs and using things like a DEM extraction to pull that information out. But what we found is, recently in ENVI, I believe it's 5.3, we released this sort of create point clouds from dense image matching. And it allows you to use two or more. You can use multiple images, and you basically just load them into this function in ENVI and let it go, and it's going to churn through all that information and look for matching image points. And it's going to extract a point cloud, which is basically XYZ values from that imagery, and then it's enabled as a LAS file, which is a LAS file or LiDAR file. And so we found that it's nice because it gives you one-to-one matching on the accuracy of the imagery. So if Playod is a half-meter sensor, you'll have, it's one-to-one, so you have half-meter postings for your elevation information that you pull off of that data. And then within that point cloud, we have a little more robust capabilities for extracting actual features like buildings or trees, things like that, from point clouds as opposed to just pulling it off of elevation information itself.
Great. And this question could be, looks like for maybe both either Gertrude or Pat. The question is, can you talk about the partnership between the ENVI image analysis software and Airbus data? Specifically, is it possible to get Airbus information within ENVI?
Yeah, I could take that one. So we've been partnered with Airbus for, I believe, a little over a year now. We have a great program. We had a great program this year where anybody who buys an ENVI image license gets, and I forget the exact number, I think it might be 1,500 or 2,000 euros worth of free Airbus data, which is great because for people who are just getting into a project, they get some software. Even if they have existing data, they might want to get some other information to be able to supplement their analysis or to verify it. So we actually have an Airbus extension within ENVI. So if you're over a specific area, you can basically search the entire Airbus catalog over that area to find Airbus imagery that you might be interested in. I don't believe we have WorldDEM hooked into ENVI directly right now because it is a pretty new product, but as our partnership continues, I could definitely see that as being something that we could incorporate. But it's also not my decision because it's above my my level here. But in general, yeah, we have great support for Airbus data within the ENVI interface itself, and we're looking forward to get more global DEM stuff in there, or WorldDEM stuff in there.
Great, and I think someone mentioned that the amount of money, if you're purchasing ENVI software that you could use toward a Airbus product, was $1,300 US or 1,000 euros. So it might be an opportunity if someone is considering purchasing ENVI to really take advantage of that before that expires. So a question that's come in perhaps for Gertrude: what is the difference between WorldDEM and Aster GDEM?
The difference is definitely the data itself. So WorldDEM is based on radar data, with the big advantage that radar can penetrate clouds, so there is no problem, for example, at the equatorial belt, and we really can offer a homogeneous data set because the radar works everywhere in the world, let's say. And from the product itself, I would say the biggest difference is that GEDEM is 30-meter posting, and WorldDEM has a 12-meter posting. And also, as I hope I could show, also the level of detail in WorldDEM because of the interferometry, the technology behind it, which is, I would say, the most accurate technology we have in this area, can really portray little features, even what we do not expect in a 12-meter elevation model. So I would say the quality of WorldDEM is, and the richness of detail is much higher. And yeah, GEDEM is available worldwide. It's 30-meter product.
Great. And I think this is probably a question for Pat, maybe. Pat, can you use ENVI to monitor glaciers or seasonal snow mantles?
Yeah, we've definitely done some work doing sort of glacial studies. You know, a lot of that will start to depend on the kind of information you want to analyze. You know, elevation data. You know, it depends on sort of the magnitude of the changes that you want to detect, as well as the kind of data that you have. So, you know, with elevation, I don't know how quick your glacier is moving or melting. It can be difficult, but it's definitely possible. I think that WorldDEM does a great job, especially once you know the timestamp of it, of giving you sort of a great baseline for that data. Or if you have older information, it gives you a nice up-to-date data set over that area. With dense image matching, so development of point clouds from Airbus Imagery, sometimes you run into sort of albedo effects, right? So the reflection or the reflectiveness of the glacier can sometimes make it difficult to find specific matches within two images because it's such a homogeneous landscape. But then when you start looking at, you know, different imaging bands such as thermal, hyperspectral, you can start seeing changes within glaciers that aren't necessarily recognizable from, you know, 4-band data or something like that. But, you know, for your specific case, definitely contact us. We'd love to talk to you, get some data, you know, see what we can do with it. I guess you never know till you try, right? But we've definitely done studies in the past with glacial melt or glacial retreat. Kevin? Kevin, I think you might be on mute.
I'm sorry about that. It looks like we have a specific question for Gertrude. It looks like the person that was asking about the Nepal area is really interested to see if the data captured in that area was pre or post earthquake in April of 2015.
Sorry, it's about the pole. Which pole?
In Nepal. There was an earthquake in the.
Okay, understood. Pole. Understood. No, the data acquisition was before. Yeah, it was done last year. So if the earthquake was this year, the data acquisition was before.
Great.
So we have pre-event data.
A question for Pat. Is there an example using ENVI Lidar for solar? And it looks like the question cut off, or other similar cases.
I was looking at that one right now. I'm going to respond to that asker with links to, I have a white paper and then also a couple blog posts on the solar example and the coastal change. So I'll put those in. I'll reply to him directly.
Okay. And then it looks like, Pat, another question for you. Do you offer student licenses of ENVI with all of the features included?
Yep. Yeah, we definitely have academic pricing, which is aggressively discounted, to put it mildly, from the standard price. And for more information on that, you could send me an email, which I think my information should still be on the screen unless you're looking at my email here. Yeah, so if you just send us an email, we can get you an academic quote for sure, and it's greatly discounted. It's definitely very, very affordable. even for graduates.
Gertrude, a question that reads, I read the ultrametric accuracy is 4 meters above 20%. Is that true as well for higher slopes like 40 to 60%, or is this an unknown accuracy?
Sorry, was it about absolute or relative accuracy? It was relative accuracy he's referring, I guess, over 20%. This is, the relative one is always just to remember is about an area of 1 degree by 1 degree. And yes, it's LE90, so 90% should be within the 4 meter, yes.
Great. Pat, a question that came in, can ENVI be applied to astrophysics for analyzing the solar atmosphere?
So that's not necessarily my wheelhouse, but I do know that IDL, so IDL was developed before ENVI. So ENVI is really just a geospatially, focused IDL interface, basically. So we do work, we have a long history of working with NASA and analyzing, extraplanetary bodies, if you will. So yes, the short answer is yes. Not necessarily ENVI itself. I mean, you could bring that kind of an image into ENVI. IDL itself is a great tool for analyzing, images that are taken pointing away from the Earth, if you will. So depending on, basically any kind of data that you would have, IDL can analyze it. So they can look in, and again, this is out of my wheelhouse, so I forget kind of what they look at for bands for the sun, but I'm sure they're using, microwaves or, different kinds of data. We also have a history with like medical imaging, so for us, it's really just complex numerical data sets. IDL can churn through them and can analyze them. So if you want more information about that, definitely shoot me an email. I can get you in touch with the right folks. Also, our consulting group that I mentioned before could definitely get you started in the right direction, depending on what kind of analysis that you want to run.
Great. Gertrude, a question for you. What is the procedure to ask for a specific area that we'd like to survey so that we can estimate the cost of that, of acquiring that area?
You can contact me and I would forward it internally. So it's easy to do that, or you go you can go to our price list, for example. It's available on the website, so that you have at least the list price in it to have a rough estimate. But I would prefer maybe you contact us directly. You can contact me directly or over our website. There's also a form you can fill in, and it goes directly to our customer service team, and they will answer immediately.
Alrighty. Pat, will the Lidar tools be made available for the Linux versions of ENVI?
That is a very good question. I do know that in the latest release of ENVI, we integrated ENVI Lidar basic functionality. So that's point cloud visualization as well as extraction of elevation data. There are Linux versions of ENVI. I haven't had the chance to test it on a Linux box yet, so short answer is I don't quite know. But I could get your information, and I could follow up with you on that for sure. And I got your name here, and I can I'll find your email address. This is a question from Patrick, so which is a great name, by the way. So Patrick, I'll get back to you with some information on ENVI Lidar tools in Linux.
Well, I really appreciate Gertrude and Pat staying on the line to help answer some of these questions. There's a lot more that have come in, so it sounds like people are very interested in this topic. We're going to wrap up here just to make sure that we end on the time that we told everybody. But we really appreciate everyone being on the line with us. Thank you again, Gertrude and Pat. And a recording of the webinar will be available on both the Airbus and the ExcelisViz websites. So if you weren't able to listen to the whole thing, or if you'd like to share it with a colleague or someone else, you'll be able to do that. So thank you again.
Real quick, Kevin, I did see one more question from Jessica. And Jessica, I don't think we'll ever get rid of ENVI Classic.
Great.
So you know.
All right, thank you guys.
All right, thanks. Have a good day.